Hello, everyone. Philip Lee returning with a new episode of Civil War Chat. Today is December 16th, 2022. Click on the subscribe button here in the lower right to subscribe to this channel, and the notification bell in the far upper right, you click on that and it will notify you. YouTube will notify you when new episodes are released. Well, it's time for our annual Christmas story, so let me go ahead and get into that. A Civil War Historian's Christmas Tale. One February night in 1938, Philip Van Doren Stern had a dream. Like most of us, his morning memories of it were vague and conflicting. But the 38-year-old Civil War historian and publisher also had an interest in fantasy and the macabre, to which the dream seemed to somehow connect. The story had something to do with a man who had never been born or had wished he had never been born. Stern decided to promptly write down his recollections, and a narrative began to take shape, which grew into a short story he titled The Greatest Gift. The finished tale leaves many of us with renewed appreciation for everyday relationships that we have come to take for granted. Stern's story failed to interest a publisher over the next 4 years. Consequently, toward the end of 1943, he printed up 200 copies at his own expense and enclosed one in each of the Christmas card envelopes he mailed that year. One recipient was a Hollywood agent who asked if she might show it to some studios. To Stern's surprise, RKO bought the film rights for $10,000 in the spring of 1944. By December, Good Housekeeping magazine finally published the story. Hollywood screenwriters set to work on a film script until the essence of Stern's fantasy shrank to the third act. Eventually, it would pass through 9 writers, including Joe Swirling, Francis Goodrich, Albert Hackett, Dorothy Parker, and Frank Capra, after Capra purchased RKO rights for $50,000. The movie was finally released in 1946, but fell short of break even on its first run. It rose to 26th place in the 1947 box office receipts. Although nominated for 5 Oscars, it failed to win any. Thereafter, the rights passed through a series of owners and ended up with Viacom. During the 1970s and 80s, local TV stations began to run it during the Christmas season. They exploited it as opportune low-cost programming for time slots not allocated to the network shows. Gradually, it gained a fan base. In 1984, an aged Frank Capra commented that the film's rise in popularity, quote, was the damnedest thing I've ever seen, close quote. He felt like, quote, the parent of a child who grows up to be president, but it is the kid who did the work, close quote. He never expected his kid to become president. In 1998, the American Film Institute ranked It's a Wonderful Life as the 11th best movie of all time and rated George Bailey as the 9th most popular hero. In novelist Andrew Klavan's analysis, Charles Dickens, his Christmas Carol, and Stern's It's a Wonderful Life are essentially mirror images of the same story. Scrooge is a man grown rich because of heart-shriveling greed that is forced by spirits to view the consequences of his existence. Conversely, George Bailey is a man in financial trouble because of his large-souled generosity that is forced by an angel to view the consequences of his non-existence. What would have happened if George had never been born? On both sides of the mirror, the results are the same: a revolutionary personal transformation. In both cases, Scrooge and George Bailey, the circumstances of each man's life do not change. Those circumstances remain the same, but instead, it is the men themselves who change. Well, that's, I think, a pretty interesting Christmas message. And so this year, what I'd like to do is provide a little bit more background on Philip Van Doren Stern. This is his short story, The Greatest Gift. It's turned out to be the most popular thing he's ever written. And but he was known at the time as a Civil War historian. He worked also for a few of the publishing houses, I guess as an editor. He was a graduate of Rutgers University. But as I say, at the time when he was living, he was better known as a Civil War historian than he was as a writer of fantasy short stories. So I've got a couple of his books I thought I'd show you. One is Secret Missions of the Civil War. This is one of his books. I read it back in 1997, and I found it interesting. Not only does it provide information on a topic that's of interest to me, secret missions is kind of interesting to begin with, and then Civil War is, amplifies that. But since he's had so much experience in the publishing industry, he writes well. And so I appreciate his writing. Another thing is that I appreciate about him is he seemed to approach the Civil War objectively. He did not have a bias either for or against the South. He grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. And as far as I can tell, his parents were also from the North. So it doesn't appear that he had any ancestral connections into the South. But this is another book that he wrote, which is a pictorial biography of Robert E. Lee. And there's lots of pictures that those of us that are familiar with Robert E. Lee have seen before, and some you may not have seen. But what I like about it is the objectivity with which he describes his admiration for Lee. And that's changed. So these are some of his books that may be of interest to some of you. Now, the other point, of course, is with Christmas approaching, you might want to get some books to give as gifts to people in your household or wherever. I recommend my book, The Confederacy at Flood Tide. It tells the story of when, in 1862, the South came closest to winning its independence, in my opinion. And it happened not only in Virginia and Maryland, but it happened, the advances happened diplomatically, and they happened militarily and politically and militarily in all three of the theaters, the Eastern Theater, the Western Theater, and even the Trans-Mississippi. So this book is Confederacy at Flood Tide. It's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble for $26. If you want to get an autographed copy, just email me, Phil, PHIL _Lee, LEIGH @me.com. And for $30, I'll get you an autographed copy and cover the postage if you're here in the United States. Okay, so we're about a week away from Christmas, actually 8 days away from Christmas. And it's Merry Christmas to you. I wish you Merry Christmas now. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.